Good morning. Today we are starting Rome and the rise of Christianity. So, earlier this week we covered Greece and a lot of the Greek culture. We talked about the history of Greece and eventually the downfall of Greece. So, now we are moving on over to Italy, which is Rome and the rise of Christianity. So, we know that geography played an important role in the development and in the downfall of Greece. Geography also plays a major role in the development of Rome. Rome is located here on this Italian peninsula. It's the boot, is what we located as. The city was in a perfect place. Basically, it was 18 miles inland, so it wasn't too close to the sea to be sacked by incoming ships. It was also located on the Tiber River, which is really helpful whenever you're wanting to transport goods or you're wanting to be able to have like a successful in farming industry. And another benefit for Rome is the fact that it is like surrounded, if you can see the texture here, it's surrounded by mountains and hills, and so it's really easy to defend this city. So the Greeks had a lot of influence on the people of Rome. They cultivated olives and grapes. They passed on their alphabet. They gave the Romans artistic and cultural models through their sculpture, architecture, and literature. So the Romans actually kind of take on a lot of the Greek influences, the Greek arts that they were so prominent with. They actually incorporate those into their own culture. The Etruscans most influenced the early development of Rome. So the Romans adopted Etruscan dress, which is like the toga and the short cloak. And the Roman army also borrowed its organization from the Etruscans. So the Romans overthrew the last Etruscan king in 509 BC and established a republic. So if you have a republic, it just means that you don't have a king or a queen, and some of your citizens have the right to vote. So you have something similar to like an emperor, a president, like you have some sort of other leader, and people actually can vote to like decide who your leader is going to be. So from 264 to 146 BC, the Romans fought the Carthaginians in the Punic Wars and gained territories of Sicily and Spain. So the territory of Carthage became a Roman province called Africa. This made Rome the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. Rome also gained control of Macedonia, Greece, and Pergamum by 129 BC. So this republic came to an end with the formation of the first triumvirate. So a triumvirate is just essentially a government that's ruled by three different people. They all have equal power. It's just to keep one person from having total authority. So the first triumvirate was made up of Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. Crassus died in battle, and the Senate voted for Caesar to lay down his command and let Pompey rule. Well, Caesar eventually became a dictator and knocked out Pompey and basically said that he was going to take care of everything himself. So Caesar was ultimately assassinated by members of the Roman Senate in 44 BC. And so while he was like an excellent military leader, he was an excellent fighter. Like a lot of people feared him. It didn't stop people from grouping up against him to remove him from power. Several of the people that he thought he could trust were in on his assassination. He wasn't assassinated by one person. He was assassinated by like his whole Senate. Basically, everyone gathered around him in a circle and took turns stabbing him. There's a nice little video clip if you'd like to see Caesar getting stabbed. It's very dramatic. If you've read the play Julius Caesar, or heard of the play Julius Caesar, it's kind of like centered around his life, his prominent, like his how he gets power and how he, obviously meets his demise. So after Caesar, you get the second triumvirate, which is made up of Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus. Octavian and Antony battled for sole power. Lepidus just kind of like vamps out, like whatever, like they don't really care about him too much. So Antony teams up with Queen Cleopatra the Seventh at the Battle of Actium in Greece, 31 BC. And Octavian's forces like smash their army and navy, and then Antony and Cleopatra flee to Egypt, where they both commit suicide a year later, supposedly with poisonous snakes, something of that nature. So after the assassination of Julius Caesar, Octavian took power in 27 BC. He became the actual first Roman emperor. The Senate awarded him the title of Augustus, or Revered One. He was also given the title Imperator, which is Commander-in-Chief, and he maintained an army of 28 legions, which is 151,000 men. So the Praetorian Guard was 9,000, and that's basically like his secret service that protect him. And so he was he's a pretty big deal. You've probably heard of Augustus over everyone else. But Augustus is who emerges as the true power of Rome, regarded as a really powerful monarch, ruler. The first four emperors after Augustus came from his family. You had Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. And I'm just going to let you know, these rulers are nothing like Augustus. They are not revered. They are not respectable. Like Caligula is nuts. Okay. He actually, there's a lot of like specials about different rulers from Rome. But Caligula actually basically said that someone told him that he couldn't do something such as like ride his horse across the ocean or whatever. So he sets up like all these tents on boats and like creates like a whole walkway for his horse so that he can ride his horse across all these ships from the mainland to this island, and just is like just nuts. They're all hungry for power for the most part. They're all like really powerful. They're really corrupt. After Nero's death, you had a series of 5 good emperors that come to power. They're known as Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. So these emperors concluded a period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, and that lasts about 200 years. Those rulers treated the ruling classes with respect. They ended arbitrary executions. They maintained peace in the empire. They supported domestic policies, and they were really just helpful to the empire because they were actually looking out for the empire as a whole instead of trying to gain more power. Meanwhile, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, they're just psycho. I mean, like honestly, they're not the kind of rulers that you would want to have if you were talking bad against them. Obviously, they're going to have you killed. I want to say Caligula like was in love with one of his sisters also. So he like actually tries to get his sister pregnant so that they can have like a pure blood kind of like heir to his throne. And so it's just it's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, so the first, like after the Pax Romana, the Roman Empire starts to expand. Sorry, I can't talk. So the Roman Empire is one of the greatest states in the world that the world had ever seen. Everything that's red here is showing you how far the Roman Empire expanded. So this was like Greece, okay? Greece was cool. Yeah, no big deal, Greece. Rome literally expanded all across 1, 2, 3 different continents. So keep that in mind. So every free person in the empire was given citizenship by the Emperor Caracalla in AD 212. Roman cities were important in the spread of Roman culture, Roman law, and the Latin language. So every Roman-built city contained temples, markets, and public buildings. They would build like bathhouses. A lot of the architecture and like the culture is spread this way. There's still like bathhouses, even in like Britain, that are used or visited from the Roman empires. So if you lived in ancient Rome, the Roman boys learned reading and writing, moral principles and family values, law, and physical training to prepare them to be soldiers. They got a plain white toga at the age of 16 to symbolize manhood, and that was kind of like their coming out. Girls were expected to have male guardians and married a man chosen by her father instead of attending secondary school until 180. That was whenever things kind of changed. Upper class Roman women had the right to own, inherit, and sell property. So if you were upper class, you were pretty privileged. You could attend races, you could go to the theater, you could go to the amphitheater, and just sit, like, you just have to sit in a separate female section. So they influenced politics through their husbands. So that would just be like, me telling my husband, I think that we should do this or make this decision. I don't think we should go to war. And, or I think we should go to war against so and so should be punished. And then their husband would just kind of like take that to the Senate. And so women had a lot more power than they did in Greece, for sure. So the Romans adopted many features of Greek style of art. They reproduced Greek statues, but unlike the Greeks, they produced more realistic works that included even their unattractive physical details. So if you remember the statues from the Greeks, like they have abs on abs on abs. It's like they put filters on all of their statues to make themselves look really nice. The Romans basically post themselves without filters. So the Romans used Greek architecture styles as well, but they incorporate curved forms like the arch, the vault, the dome, and that kind of makes theirs a little more unique than just the Greek architectural kind of like columns and posts. They used concrete on a large scale to build larger buildings than the Greeks, and they constructed 50,000 miles of roads and bridges throughout the empire, which is quite a feat. They also constructed aqueducts to supply water, basically just a system to have running water in your city. There's a Latin historian, Livy, who wrote the early history of Rome. So here we have more history being written down thanks to the Greeks, but it's passed down into Roman culture as well. The Romans had more slaves and relied on slave labor more than any other empire in the ancient world. Greek slaves worked as tutors, musicians, and doctors and artists. Others worked as cooks, valets, waiters, cleaners, household workers, gardeners, or farm laborers. And they all lived and worked in terrible conditions. A lot of them would revolt and murder their masters. The most famous revolt occurred in 73 BC by a gladiator named Spartacus. I think there's a show on Netflix that talks about Spartacus, the life of Spartacus. It might be based on him. I haven't seen it. I'm not really sure. It looks like a gladiator type show though. So basically Spartacus riles up 70,000 slaves and they're fixing to come through and just destroy everyone and try to gain their freedom and take over the government. But they capture Spartacus and then kill him in 71 BC. And then 6,000 of his followers were crucified thereafter. So if you can imagine 6,000 people being crucified, that probably taught a lot of the slaves a lesson. So for entertainment, a lot of public spectacles were provided by the emperor as part of the great religious festivals celebrated by the state. So horse and chariot races attracted hundreds of thousands at the Circus Maximus. That's one of the really popular event venues. You'd have dramatic performances and theaters, and then gladiatorial shows. Those are the most famous of all the public spectacles. So men would fight to the death. They embodied the Roman virtues of bravery, honor, and glory in a world that was cruel and unpredictable. Gladiators were admired as heroes, but a lot of them are slaves or prisoners of war, and they're having to fight because they have no other choice. So, that's one way to get rid of your prisoners and not really have to pay to feed and clothe them and such, I guess. I don't know. They didn't really have as much of a moral compass as people today. So they didn't have a problem letting people just fight to the death as punishment. A lot different from us today. So the official state religion focused on worship a number of gods and goddesses. So basically their gods and goddesses are the same as the Greek gods and goddesses. They just have different names. So Jupiter is Zeus. Juno is another. Then you have Minerva and Mars. All these different gods and goddesses are the equivalent of other Greek gods and goddesses. Emperors were often officially made gods by the Roman Senate. Um, that was another thing I was going to tell you about Caligula. So him and his horse had like a really close relationship. He made his horse a part of Senate, like made him a member of the Senate because his horse was, like able to talk to him. Like people said that they were involved romantically. Stuff's like, yeah, weird. Anyway, um, back on track. Sorry. Romans believed that their empire was a result of the gods showing them favor. The reason that they were able to like conquer so much territory, the reason they were able to like um, allow so much growth and be so successful is because the gods favored them. So Romans were tolerant of other religions and they allowed the worship of native gods and goddesses throughout their provinces. But I'm going to tell you, somebody named Jesus kind of ruins that for the Romans. A Christian movement spreads across the Roman Empire when the Jewish prophet Jesus overcame death. His teachings of humility, charity, and love toward others later shaped the value system of Western civilization. So whenever Jesus dies and overcomes death, like he comes back to life 3 days later, everybody is basically like, we need to really kind of keep an eye on this guy, like he had already caused a lot of corruption because a lot of people started following him over like the other gods. And so the Senate and like the emperors become really nervous because they think that Jesus is going to like try to take over the government. And so they view him as like someone who is treasonous. And that's why they like capture him and crucify him. So Jesus was a real person. And this is like kind of his story as far as like how he influenced Rome in the history of the world, honestly. So as Christianity spread, Romans came to view Christians as harmful to the Roman state. Christians refused to worship the state gods and emperors. They didn't want to do that because they didn't believe in polytheism. They were a monotheistic religion. There's one God. So the Romans see this as an act of treason, punishable by death, and they start, killing Christians. Christians thought that there was only one God. If you worship more than one God, then that's endangering your salvation. So the Roman government persecuted Christians and feared an uprising because there were so many of them. It's insane how fast the Christian religion like grows because people like knew that this man literally overcame death thanks to God. He was the Son of God. So Christianity prospers whenever Constantine becomes the first Christian emperor. Basically, he issues the Edict of Milan, and that tolerates Christianity officially. The Romans adopt Christianity as their official religion under Theodosius. So finally, like Rome kind of adapts, and they're like, okay, cool, like we'll let it, like it's either let it be a part of it, or we're gonna, eventually be taken over. Like we're not gonna be able to do this much longer. We can't keep up this whole like polytheistic charade. So from 235 to 284, the Roman Empire was governed by a series of 22 emperors. That's a problem. If you look, that's like 50 years. You have 22 emperors in like less than 50 years. So they used military power to seize power. And a lot of them died violently because they were overthrown by other people who were trying to take over the government violently. So there's a lot of unrest. Christianity's emphasis on the spiritual kingdom weakened the Roman military virtues as well. Instead of being like a dominant fighting power, they kind of cut back on that. They're like, that's not really the Christian way. Fighting isn't the Christian way. So traditional Roman values decline as non-Italians start to gain prominence in the empire. So lead poisoning through lead in water pipes and cups also caused a mental decline in the population, which is kind of insane, but that's, it happens. They also had a plague wipe out a whole 10th of their population. Unfortunately. Rome also failed to advance technologically due to slavery. They used physical manpower to do labor instead of, inventing new machines. Rome could not create a workable political system. They kept changing political systems. They couldn't figure out what would work best for them. And eventually, you get 50, a span of 22, in a span of 50 years, 22 different emperors. There's constant invasions from Germanic tribes, weakening the empire as well, and they're not really fighting back as much. So in 476 BC, Romulus is forced to abdicate the throne of Western Rome. And so that marks the end of the Western Empire. So the Western Empire is just the Roman part of the Roman Empire. Okay, that's like just one half. In the Eastern part, over in that closer to the Asian side of things, closer to the Eastern European side of things, you have the Byzantine Empire, and that continues on. So the Western part falls, but the Eastern part continues on. Keep that in mind because we'll talk about the Eastern part. Anyway, be sure that you've taken notes over this. We'll have an activity on Monday, maybe Tuesday, study guide, and then tests coming up. So be looking over your notes. Make sure that you've taken good notes. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm always here. Watch the video links on your own. I'm not able to do that for you. Hope you guys have a great weekend.